This is a Victorian lower ground floor flat that's tenanted. It's been damp proofed, as you can see with the dots in this wall. That increases the risk of mould, as is seen in the bathroom. Mould grows where relative humidity goes above 85% for a prolonged period of time. It's partially temperature related and partially vapor related. Here we've got the two in combination. So here we are in the flat. I'm just going to explain why you're getting the mould here and here and over here, and then we'll look at the recommendations at the end. I'm just going to go on to a thermal image. You can see the thermal image. We get I'll start here, the mould is in the area where you're getting the heat loss. That's because relative humidity, so mould grows where relative humidity rises above 85% for a prolonged period of time. You got specific risks here. One is you got the heat loss because of the lack of insulation. And the second one is the ventilation, and I'll show you the vent speed, but it's not as fast as it should be. The bathroom vent should run at 15 litres a second. It's running about half that at 8 litres a second. And the other problem is, as soon as you turn the light out, the vent turns off. The issue with that is that about 90% of the vapour remains in the room after a shower is taken. So you need to have it running for at least half an hour. We're going to have a quick look on the outside. I don't see any brown stains that, well, there's a brown stain there, but I doubt that's coming from the outside, but it may be. All these properties tend to have a bit of a risk with under the floor level. You should notice that the properties had damp proofing treatment in the past, and unfortunately the downside of that is that it reduces the wall's ability to absorb a buffer vapor, so increasing the risk of condensation and mold. You've got a crack there that should be filled, but I doubt that's causing penetrating damp. There's a bit of oh, well, that's probably just paint, but it generally it doesn't look too bad, but there's just a lot of heat loss. It's cold and there isn't a huge amount that can be done about that. The other thing is that there's an argument for having the bathroom as a sacrificial surface where the condensation takes place rather than elsewhere in the property, because although I think you've got very good tenants, you won't always have great tenants. I've asked them to keep the door closed so that you contain the vapour within the property. You'll see here, there's brown here, and that's because condensation is taking place on the ground, on the solid surface where it's cold, and it's running through past here, and even as it's a solid floor, so you don't need to worry about it, but you've probably got early stages of rot there, but it's solid, so you don't worry, it's not structural. But water is condensing here, and possibly even to some degree splashes from the inevitable shower, and then it's rising up here. That's not rising damp. Rising damp comes from groundwater, but all water is absorbed upwards through building material, and this brown stain comes from the timber, and this is damp. I'll show you a quick image showing with a damp meter. So those are the main things, but if we come into the kitchen, you'll see that, oh, pussycat. Well, so just around near to the cat, just here, there is, so there's damp there. And there are two issues here. Is you've got a solid floor, so any vapour from, for instance, from cooking. By the way, your kitchen extractor fan is working well, I've tested it, but is it always used? I'm going to leave the data logger there. But condensation forming on the cold solid floor will be absorbed upwards, so you're always going to have a risk. Plus the radiator, when it's not in use, particularly in the autumn, late autumn and spring, early spring, before people start to use the radiator, you get a lot of heat loss at night. It can get very cold at night, and you will end up with a risk of condensation. So those are the main findings, but I'll be looking at the data loggers over time. The thing here is that you're getting all the humidity in the bathroom, and it's forming condensation on the cold floor, and then it's rising up. So it's not rising damp, it's just water that's rising up through absorption, and that's why you're getting the brown discoloration. It comes from the timber. This property is being damp proofed, which unfortunately is counterproductive, because it causes, I know, it reduces the natural absorption. Sorry, do you mind if I just it reduces the natural absorption of vapor into the wall, so you lose out on the buffering benefit of a normal wall. But there you go. And again, you're getting, this is just condensation forming on the solid floor. And when radiators aren't in use, they cause heat loss and increase the risk of condensation, as does the solid floor, causes extra heat loss.
Yeah.
So there are a few compounding factors on the outside. You've got paint that is cracking, allowing micro cracking and water to penetrate through, increasing the heat loss, plus there's the heat loss around the radiator. The kitchen extractor fan works well, 50 litres a second. It should run at least 30 litres. And having a dehumidifier is good, although it's a relatively small one, this one. But if it's used constantly, 24/7, it should be fine, especially if drying clothes internally. The passive vent, I'm ambivalent about them. They're better than no ventilation at all, but unless there's airflow outside, you're just going to get the heat loss with relatively little benefit. I put in some sensors. You'll be able to use them to look at the changes over time. It's quite difficult to explain with this. The benefit of Wi-Fi sensors is that a landlord can check to see what's happening at any time without having to visit the property. The downside is these particular ones don't export the CSV file, so you have to look at a screen and work out what's happening from the screen. Fortunately, I have built a mold point calculator. If you put in the data, in this case it was 19 degrees centigrade and 65% relative humidity, it calculates the mold point, which is 14.8, and in this case also the condensation, the dew point, the point where condensation takes place, which is 12.3. We can look back to the infrared and see that the temperature is below the dew point and in places below the mold point.